Dr. Chloe, I've had over the last few days, I've had so many occasions to think about things that I wanted to talk to you about, things I'd like you to reveal to our audience, because I find that you are such, not only you just have good sense, obviously super well educated, and a practitioner, in spite of the fact that you're only 16 years old, a practitioner for quite a while now. But what I like about what you bring to us is a sense of memory tricks, tools, and shortcuts to help us be our own psychologist, help us to fix ourselves. And I just think about the menu of techniques that you describe in the book, and I refer to them often, and I quote you often. The big subject for all of us is how do you manage anxiety? And when I told some friends in a social gathering over the weekend that I was going to have a chance to speak with you again, all of a sudden questions bubble up. Oh, I wonder what she would say about this. One that came up a lot was common among my age group. You wake up in the middle of the night, you have to do something biological perhaps, and you get back and you start to go through the list of all the reasons why you should be worried, which causes you not to get back to sleep and causes your anxiety level go up. And it's a downward spiral. Here's all the things I should be nervous about. Now I'm getting nervous about the things I'm nervous about. Now I'm getting nervous about I won't be able to get back to sleep. I have to get up so I won't have enough sleep to function properly in my day tomorrow. And you get that bad spiral. How do you like to recommend people self-correct?
Yes. Okay. So having spent about 20 years in the city that never sleeps, I totally get that. And when we do have just a lot of nervous energy and a lot going on in our lives, it's so true. Whether it's when we're trying to fall asleep at night or get back to sleep, it can be a little bit of a battle. And your story, Jim, makes me think of something that one of my very best clinical supervisors in my training at Lenox Hill Hospital taught to me once is he said, Chloe, you must guard your sleep. You must. It is the foundation of mental health. If you have a client coming to you with, issues, problems, whatever, first find out how their sleep is because,
Really?
there's nothing you're going to be able to, it's like trying to teach somebody to read before they know the alphabet. Your interventions will land a lot better.
You said good sleep is the foundation of good mental health.
Oh, absolutely. That's why, it's like a torture technique, right? To deprive people of mental health. That's how the military, I don't know if the US military, but if you want to get somebody to crack, you deprive them of sleep, right? It's a known technique. So your friends were absolutely right to be thinking about that, about their sleep and how and why they can and should guard their sleep, as that supervisor told me. So how do we do it exactly now that we have established it's important? I have a few ideas. It's combining a couple of techniques from the book. So one technique is called worry time, which is where if you have worries or concerns popping into your head, instead of feeling like you have a black and white choice of thinking and solving it right here and now, or just pushing it out of your mind, the alternative is you can keep a little notepad by your bed, jot down issues that may arise that you think of in the middle of the night, because sometimes we're so what psychologists call defended during the day that we don't even allow ourselves to think about really vulnerable issues until the middle of the night and they pop into our mind.
Yeah, are we able to delude ourselves when we're busy that as long as we're moving, we're okay, something's going to happen? But it's when you get that downtime that you can't block it out with busyness. It's just
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, the unconscious, of course, gets active at night. That's why we have dreams and all these other things. So it's not unusual for sometimes ideas to emerge for people in the middle of the night. And so you can keep, and frankly, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's creative ideas. So you can keep a notepad And you don't have to flesh it all out or solve everything right then and there. In fact, you shouldn't. But you can write a few notes that will key you to think about it in the morning. You can also, if it's more kind of just daily to-dos or whatever that you're thinking of, you can proactively solve for that by writing down your to-do list or thoughts for tomorrow on a little piece of paper before you do go to sleep. And one final tip about this is another technique from the book using what I call thought replacement, because sometimes people have it in their minds again that somehow sleep is indulgent and that if they really wanted to be productive, they'd be working on these issues that are popping into their minds. So I suggest a thought replacement that you can say to yourself after you've, jotted down any important ideas or whatever. You can then start simply repeating to yourself the following sentence, which is, the most productive thing I can do right now is sleep. The most productive thing I can do right now is sleep. And you just silently say that to yourself because number one, it hijacks your internal monologue. You're focusing on those words. It's harder for your brain to focus on other words. It also reminds you, it gives you permission and validation that indeed this sleep will help you to do the things you need to do. It's not a choice between sleeping and productivity. They actually serve each other.
Dr. Chloe, what are our dreams? You mentioned sometimes you wake up and you think about what you've just been dreaming and say, oh my goodness, there might be a creative bone in there. Does it give us insights? I love remembering my dreams when I wake up. And sometimes I'm a notepad on the end table guy. And sometimes I'll make a note about those dreams because, oh my God, I did a whole novel there, a whole movie score. Maybe I do have some creativity in that.
Definitely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you do that. And, for people that for whatever reason, maybe a notepad's not their thing, I would encourage them to keep just an old-fashioned tape recorder, not your phone, because once you pick up your phone, you get that blue light, you see the notifications of other things.
I've heard the blue light thing. What is the significance of blue light?
Yeah. So like devices that have those LED screens, like all of our cell phones and everything, like your computer screen, they emit a certain light that has kind of a blue tone to it. And that actually really cues us into wakefulness. So that's one of the reasons why they say you should power off all of your devices when you're going to sleep. Whether you have a notebook, a paper notebook, or a cassette recorder or whatever, it's fine. But please don't use your cell phone for this activity.
I carry a recorder with me all day.
What kind do you use?
Notes. I'll tell you, it's right. It's a little Olympus.
Love it.
Quick to press a button and you just record off a bunch. And then at the end of the day, I give it to Patty or Lisa or myself, plug it into PC. If I recorded something I want to listen again, it goes into my recordings files. Or if it's just memos to the team, Lisa distributes, types them up and distributes them. But that way everything gets recorded. I feel from a control point of view that if I have a good idea, it may not be good enough for us to act on right now because we have other priorities. But as long as I capture it on a list to review later, I feel in more of a control situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it does help us to put things into words and talk them through. So the Olympus recorder definitely sounds like a good bedside option as well for people. So your question about dreams and what they mean, are they, just bio-random neurological firing, or do they have meaning? The answer is all of the above. There's no psychologist that can tell you definitively. Different psychologists have different opinions. I personally, as a former yoga teacher, so I really believe in the body. So sometimes it just means nothing, and it's just your body going through some swings, and your brain is interpreting that through your dreams. But sometimes I think dreams really do have meaning. So I do encourage people, if they're interested in that, again, the old bedside table, to keep a notebook and write down your dreams first thing in the morning. You'll actually start paying more attention to your dreams if you start writing them down. And you might discover that there are certain themes in your life that are getting enacted through your dreams. It can be very interesting.
Dr. Chloe, as I read your book a couple of times now, I find when I'm reading a book, in this case, your book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, I read with a pen in my hand, this kind of a pen. and I have a pad all the time because I'm writing down things. Because if I'm reading, knowing that I'm going to want to write down my takeaway from that chapter, I think differently. I'm trying to draw a conclusion. I found when I was in school, if I took notes during class, even if I didn't come back and reread them, the function of writing just changes the mapping in my mind. And then when I'm thinking of the answer, I can visualize the page, the little tricks I've learned in my note taking to get me to come to a point, the symbol, what I circled, what I highlighted. What is the connection in terms of brain formatting between this function and learning?
So many things, and I'm right there with you. I almost feel like I cannot think without, a pen in my hand sometimes. So there's a couple of levels, Jim, where what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So first of all, we simply encode the information better when we are interacting with it. When we're circling things and highlighting things, we're having to make a cognitive choice about which material to circle and highlight. So we're engaging with it. Also, if we're making notes, we have to make cognitive choices about which keywords are important enough to write down. And when we physically write them versus type them, it actually activates more regions of the brain because it takes more motor skills and things like that. And there's evidence that people tend to do just more cognitive elaboration and flair when they're writing things down. So that's one level, is the encoding
So it's
level.
biophysical, huh?
Yes. And then another interesting level where writing things down, say in a book or whatever, really helps people in terms of learning and information recall, is that when you look at it later, even just thumbing through the book that you've highlighted and made a few notes in, it creates what psychologists call environmental cues. So by seeing your
That
own
makes sense.
handwriting and remembering that, maybe you were using a certain pen, or even the mood we're in when we do our handwriting reflects back to us our mental state. And that actually cues us deeper into that mental state. So for example, there's studies that show, for example, if you learn something in a particular classroom, you'll test better on that material if you get to take the test in the same classroom, because it's called an environmental cue that your brain has when it encoded that information. So your very own handwriting can become an environmental cue.
What kind of a student were you? Obviously, you've gone to great schools, got a master, undergraduate degree, a master's degree, a PhD in psychology. What kind of a student were you? Always a great student?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. So I definitely finished strong, summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, Ivy League, all that. But guess what, Jim? I was a high school dropout.
Get out.
Yeah, no, I'm totally serious.
And this was in Illinois?
No, I grew up in Michigan.
Oh, Michigan.
And I moved to Chicago.
One of those Big Ten states.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town. And when I was 8 years old, I told everybody I was going to live in New York and be on television. And so thankfully it did come true.
And check.
Yeah. But I was a good student, and then I ran into some difficult chapters during my teens, and I did drop out of school. In a weird way, I actually think it was the best thing for me because I really wasn't ready. And during that time, as a young adult without a college degree, that's when I became a yoga teacher. And through that work, teaching yoga is how I got super interested in the mind-body connection and in the brain, and how people can work towards goals. And then I specifically wanted to go get a PhD in clinical psychology for a specific goal of what I wanted to do. And then I ended up finishing, like I said, Columbia with a 4.0, got into a top PhD program. I just needed a reason to know why I was doing it.
Wow, that's some story, and it's a great story for a lot of us who are parents and grandparents to realize that mistakes early on don't need to be fatal.
Right.
And you can learn from them, and it can help you to find better direction. So you then, with options narrowed, found your way to yoga. It connects you better to yourself, helps you to learn more about yourself. Mind-body connection becomes important to you. Now you have a purpose when you go back to school. You've learned, you matured, and you have a goal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mentioned to you that I'm a list nut. but you encourage list making, particularly when it comes to emotions. You talk about doing to-do lists with your own emotions.
Absolutely. So that's one of my favorite techniques from the book. So, and in fact, in thinking about the topics that we might be discussing today, your team told me that they might even kind of want to apply some of these techniques to holiday settings and holiday
Sure.
challenges. So, for the to-do list with emotions, I want to share how we could use that vis-a-vis the holidays. So a lot of people are as you said, list nuts. I love that term. And a lot of people, of course, have to-do lists. What I like to do with this to-do list with emotions is we take it in a way to the next level by saying, I'm going to look at my to-do list and then I'm going to think about the emotions I feel about that item. And then I can layer in a self-care plan. And what this does is it helps us to not get into procrastination and burnout, where a lot of people, they just kind of either burn out on their to-do list or they're doing everything on it, but they feel like a hamster on a wheel. They are not connected with the reasons why they're doing what they're doing. So what that looks like with a practical example is, let's suppose it's on your to-do list that, you need to pack for your holiday travel to go see your family. And one of the emotions that comes up for you there is actually anxiety or apprehension because there are certain family members that are kind of stressful for you to see. So what you would do then is you would layer in a self-care plan, which is that maybe you would say, okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and call the local gym there and make myself a personal training appointment or a massage appointment, or even just book with my friend to say, can we have a cell phone checkup call while I'm going to be doing a walk at 4 o'clock on December 26th. I'm going to, just take a walk to get some fresh air. And you and I are going to just chat because I'm going to need some social support during this trip. So, we look at that list, we think about the emotions that come up, and then we layer in a self-care plan. And the example I just gave is, for difficult emotions, but this works too to make sure we're maximizing our positive emotions. So let's even say that you looked at that list, pack for the trip, and you just had this excitement and anticipation to see certain family members that you rarely get to see. Maybe the self-care
Mhm.
plan then is that you want to, book for the special Christmas tea that you're going to, go and celebrate with your family members, or that you take a behavior to make sure that you really maximize and drink in the positives of what you're feeling in that moment.
So, so much of your work is about teaching us how to manage our own emotions, manage the energy that comes from anxiety, turning into a positive energy. And what you're suggesting now is for those of us who are list makers, nuts, or those who aren't, that for those who aren't list makers, it's time you started a list. And for those of us who just make lists all the time, we need a new one. And the new one is our own self-help plan. We know what the holidays are like. What are we going to do to manage our energy? What are the things we're going to build into our plan, whether it's reading, things we can consume? You talk an awful lot in the book about mindfulness and building that into our calendar and our to-do list. So you've given us a new list to make up, but it just makes all the sense in the world. You're so good at giving us the tools to help ourselves. Years ago, I got to know a terrific man who I think was a great teacher. He was known as a motivational speaker. I think that was a strange handle. His name was Zig Ziglar. And he talked about stinking thinking. He's a man from Mississippi. And it's right up your alley in terms of self-help, self-correction in this case. That there are certain things that we know we're doing and say, wait a minute, I am doing stinking thinking. And here are the things I need to do to change my mental course and get to beyond me. Because I know if I continue to go down that line, I'm going to get angry, and there's going to be energy that's not positive, and it runs a risk of making people around me miserable. And I can fix this myself. So oh my goodness, I'm calling a foul on myself. I'm doing stinking thinking. What do I do, Dr. Chloe?
I love that stinking thinking. I love it because it makes us laugh a little bit. It's a direct awareness where we're telling the truth about ourselves that something's wrong, but we're bringing in a little bit of levity, which I think is great. Kind of on a similar line, I think when people catch themselves doing stinking thinking, something in the book I suggest that they do is to congratulate themselves on that awareness, because a lot of people, can be
That's great.
perfectionists and things like that. And it actually makes it very difficult for them to confront areas that they need to improve because they just automatically become so hard on themselves. And when that happens, it's demotivating, it sucks up all the energy, and it might even make us unwilling to notice faults because we get so down on ourselves. So when you notice yourself in that stinking thinking, I encourage people to say, wow, congratulations. I'm so glad to myself that I noticed that. It's wonderful that I have that awareness. And then the next, because it's really so much better than non-awareness, right? If you think about it.
Uh,
And then the next step, as depending on the situation, there's a technique in my book called thought replacement. And so instead of then, going into some kind of a self-castigating monologue, you can say to yourself, okay, so such and such, is definitely not perfect and I don't feel good about it. What can I do about it? That's the next question, because again, the healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. We don't want to waste the good energy.
stop there. Stimulate preparation
Stimulate
behavior.
preparation behaviors. The healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. So when you feel that, stinking thinking awareness that something isn't right or that something's wrong, we want to say, okay, I'm so glad I have this awareness. What can I do about it? What could this be stimulating me to do? And if it's something that's in the past that you can't do anything about anymore, you might say, I'm so glad I have the awareness that the way I handled that could be better. What I learned is
We might even
X,
tell
Y, Z.
ourselves that we're growing, we're maturing, we're evolving.
Exactly. People without awareness don't grow. They don't even realize that there's a need to make an improvement. So it's really important the way we frame our awareness of those things.
You remind me of a couple of things there, Dr. Chloe. One is humor. The fact that stinking thinking does it, you have to crease your cheeks a little bit when you hear that. And especially I hear it in Zig's voice, which had this big, beautiful Southern drawl. What role humor plays is one that you just tipped on for me. Shame is an important and debilitating emotion. And we all have shame moments from our life, from our past, and it's so powerful and it's so debilitating. Similar to how you teach us how to manage our energy of anxiety and turn it into a positive. One of my heroes since passed in business was business and life, was a fellow named Wayne Heisinger. And Wayne is famous for creating Blockbuster Video, Waste Management, Republic Industries, Extended Stay of America. He created 5 different Fortune 500 companies. It's a feat never accomplished by anyone else, just nothing short of amazing. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to him in my life and spend some time with him. And he taught me about the difference between people who succeed and people who don't. He said, people like you and me, Jim, and boy, to be flattered to have him put me in the same category as him. He said, we make as many mistakes as anybody else, probably a lot more. But we don't allow ourselves when we make a mistake to say, oh my God, I made a mistake, I'll never do it again. And you become paralyzed for fear of making that mistake again. He said successful people that he's come across, and certainly he was the epitome in my mind of successful people, he said have the ability to turn those mistakes, not to be shameful about them, in fact, to go to the next level and make it a joke and allow themselves to be able to laugh at how dumb a move it was. And he said, when you take it to the other extreme, where you're telling other people about it, not trying to hide it because of the shame you feel, and say, it gives people around you the opportunity to realize you can make mistakes and survive it as long as you're going forward, as long as you learn from it and go forward. Not make the same one over and over again, but realize that mistakes are part of life. Learn from it, package it, sell it, and learn to laugh about it. How do you help people with shameful moments from their life?
Yeah, so I love that story, Jim. And I mean, we all make mistakes. And so I love even just hearing about successful people, like you and your friend being open about that. I love your story about the Chinese silk jackets and how you put them on the walls and stuff.
But
I love that.
without being conscious of it, telling that story was my way of packaging a disaster business wise and saying, yeah, I did it. Let's make it part of the lore and let's use it around the office to help, so the person who created the wall of shame with all my bad ideas, including that Chinese silk jacket, was uncomfortable that I'd be embarrassed by it or put off by it. And it gave me the excuse to laugh at myself.
I do love it. Now, about the conversation about shame, I want to kind of add one little caveat, which is
Go
that
ahead.
actually there is a healthy function to shame, which is to alert us when we have not lived up to our own moral standards. Now, you're absolutely right that making a business mistake isn't a moral failure, right? And so some people can get shame triggered when they don't need it, right? So, if somebody has a bad day at the office because of a random thing, they shouldn't feel ashamed. However, if you have a bad day at the office because you stayed up all night drinking the night before, or because you didn't, do a good job preparing yourself, and then you feel
You,
that
you should feel shame.
yeah, you have what we actually call a healthy sense of shame. Now the important question then is what do you do next with it? If you just simply spiral into berating yourself and self-castigation, that's not productive. It's not even using the healthy function of shame. But the
Mhm.
healthy function of shame there would be for you, not you, but for one to reflect and to say, okay, I didn't live up to my own moral standards of how I want to conduct myself here. And again, congratulate yourself. I'm so glad I realized this. And then, what can I do about it? Or what's going on in my life that I felt the need to get pulled off track this way? So we do want to ask ourselves that. And then about, whether it be in that department, like the shame department, or the general mistakes department, there's a chapter in my book about the difference between self-discipline, which is good, and self-flagellation, which is bad, and it's not
Right.
even productive.
Help us understand the difference there.
Yeah, so self-discipline again is where you might say, okay, that idea didn't work, or I don't like the way I behaved there. What can I do about it differently? How can I safeguard myself? How can I bolster myself? How can I even stop myself from doing that again? There's another technique in the book called response prevention, for people that maybe send angry texts that they know that they shouldn't. So when you think productively about how can I stop that from happening again, or how can I do better next time, that's in the self-discipline space. If it's just in the I'm an idiot, I shouldn't, even try category, that's self-flagellation.
Have you ever committed that sin of saying, I'm an idiot to yourself?
Yeah, I'm sure I have. I think we all occasionally get there, but you know what I do when I realize it? I
Go ahead.
congratulate myself. I say, oh, I'm so glad I caught myself in that stinking thinking.
Dr. Chloe, in your practice, you've worked with a lot of people. Oftentimes, there'll be a substance abuse issue there. What is it about when I think of my friends, my adult friends, close to my age, there's only a few of us left on the planet. Some of the finest people I know are people who've gone through 12-step recovery programs. In terms of your teachings and the discipline and teachings of a 12-step program, when I read your book, I saw a lot of overlap.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very interesting connection, because there's a connection in some sense to a higher power or to mindfulness, to an awareness of yourself, and to a sense of personal responsibility and the empowerment that comes with that. That a lot of the way we feel and the life we live does come down to the choices we make, which is so much better than thinking of, whether it be substance abuse or anxiety as something that happens to us like the weather. A lot of it is about choices we make, and there are constructive ways of handling it. When it comes to drinking, though, I'll just share there's kind of a fun approach that I have. I wrote a blog about this called mindful drinking. If anybody wants to Google it in preparation for the holidays. But so what we do with the mindful drinking is, first we, observe our own drinking habits without trying to change them. And then we identify what I call, your sweet spot or your magic number. Like, what's the number of drinks that really is optimal, where you truly feel good, you don't feel bad the next day, it serves its purpose. You learn what that number is, because it does take some observation. And then your goal is to learn how to stick to that number, because it's totally understandable. Like, okay, my magic number is 3. Like, that's a good number for me. I'll be feeling great. I'll be having a wonderful time. But above that, it's not even going to help me. It's not even going to make me feel any. Yeah. So, but the problem is that without that awareness, a clear awareness and practice at sticking to that magic number, we can be seduced in the moment when we've had 3 and we're feeling on top of the world to think, oh, well, 4 or 5 might be even better. So
you have to pre-think, because if you get to that number, if it's 2 or if it's 3 over the course of an evening at a social event, you're not going to be, if you've pre-thought about it and and you've done the self-evaluation and analysis, you're arming yourself to make better decisions in the moment.
Yes. And then you also have this thought framework around it, where you say to yourself, 3 is the number that gives me maximal pleasure. That this isn't even declining, that 4th drink isn't even declining maximal pleasure. I'm sticking in the pleasure zone. I've identified the maximal pleasure zone, and I'm staying there, which is, I think, a more fun way to think about it than 3 is my limit,
Yeah, not a negative. Think of it in terms of positive framing, not, oh, I'd like to have more, but I can't.
Right.
No, I don't need more, because I've relaxed enough, I've had the engagement, and it tips into the negative for me if I go beyond that point. So that's positive framing.
Exactly. And it's accurate. So it's not only positive, but it's
thought
also
replacement, perhaps.
It actually is. You're 100% correct. So when you find yourself thinking like, oh, like you said, like, oh, I'd like another one, but I can't, you replace that with 3 is my maximal pleasure zone.
12-step programs give people the opportunity to take control of their own lives, gives them a roadmap to do it, and gives them the permission to fail, and a sense of community, which is extremely important for people in recovery, to know that a lot of people have been there before them. A lot of people will be there after them. And a big component of 12-step programs is, at some point, I can help others. Well, you've been so generous with your time today. I've made lists here of other people that I'll be gifting this to for birthdays, graduation, and of course the holiday season, because your teaching is so practical and so spot on. I found myself laughing at myself.
Good. I'm so glad.
Because there's a lot to laugh about here. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being a good friend. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much, Jim. Always great to see you.
Hope to see you again soon, whether virtually or in person.